Welcome to Shelf Talkers, a podcast from Village Well Books and Coffee in downtown Culver City. Welcome back to Shelf Talkers. This is Jennifer Casper, founder and owner of Village Well Books and Coffee in downtown Culver City, California. We are a third place dedicated to welcome, comfort, inspiration, and connection. And Shelf Talkers is our podcast on which we talk to authors and readers about books. We've been shifting to a rotating cast of hosts, and this week, former bookseller and independent filmmaker Julia Elizabeth Evans, one of the original producers of Shelf Talkers, is joined by Judith Martin Straw, who's a bookseller and also editor and publisher of Culver City Crossroads. They will be interviewing David A. Romero. David is a poet and came in to discuss his latest collection, Diamond Bars 2. I like to refer to David as the hardest working poet in Los Angeles. When his book, My Name is Romero, came out in 2020, he did a reading here at Village Well and also hustled himself into bookstores all over the state. He's got a lot of creative energy and he's getting what he has to say out into the world with a force. David brought along his partner in publishing, the poet Matt Sedillo. The two of them created Martillo Press and have worked with us this past year to put on the Culver City Book Festival. We've already started planning the next one, which will be down the street at the Vending Museum on February 22nd, 2025. In our interview today, David and Matt talk about creating and performing art, as well as their experience in the publishing world. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
David A. Romero, we're here and we're talking, and he has his new book out, Diamond Bars 2. David, would you be willing to write a Shelf Talker, a little pitch or a little two-sentence bit about the book? Would you write a Shelf Talker for Diamond Bars 2?
Diamond Bars 2 is a love letter to the city of Diamond Bar. Snoop Dogg lives there.
That hit so hard. That might be the best Shelf Talker that has ever been recorded on Shelf Talkers, the podcast. And I think that might be... No, I'm gonna call it that was.
No, especially when Snoop Dogg comes in.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gonna...
That was the best Shelf Talker that's been written on the podcast. No, that was easy. Yeah.
So I'm Judith Martin Straw. I'm the publisher and editor at Culver City Crossroads, and I'm also here at the Village Well bookstore. So we're so glad you're here this morning. Thanks. I wanted to ask if there was a poet or a poem that really just opened the door for you when you were growing up, when you were little and you were first getting to read this kind of thing. Was there one particular work or one particular poet that just really turned on the light?
Yes. So first of all, thank you to Julia and Judith for having me on the program. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. And to answer your question, for me, it was really Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe was the poet because I was fortunate enough to have a few of his works, translated. There were a few things. His works or references to his works would appear in shows like Animaniacs and Tiny Toons Adventures and The Simpsons. The early works of Tim Burton. He has a short called Vincent, which is about a young child who thinks he's either Vincent Price or Edgar Allan Poe. Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate enough to have those kind of gateways into his work and then to read them. And an interesting thing too is, I guess you have Dr. Seuss, of course, is another, people's, first introduction to poetry really was with me. And I never got super into Shel Silverstein for some reason.
So just to follow up on that, so with Poe, especially with Seuss, these are very structured rhyming works, and your work seems to be much more free verse, free form. How do you kind of follow through on the going from the formal poetry to the much more casual, informal poetry?
Yeah, so I would say I had really two baptisms into poetry. One as a young man with Edgar Allan Poe, and then later on as an adult in my college years, being introduced to the work of Saul Williams in particular, was a New York spoken word slam legend who would blend classical poetry with hip hop, with theater, with a lot of references to religion, to mythology and politics, and really create this tremendous synthesis of the old and the new.
Yeah, his work had a lot of threads, a lot of flow.
And very, very dynamic, very explosive. And that to me, that and really to have that kind of new experience of like, wow, this is work that I really have to sit down and think about and analyze and look at the construction of it. It was really, but there were also things there that were easily accessible, you know, and that it functioned on both levels of something incredibly profound, the same way that, you know, if you sat down with, you know, reading To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, or something by James Joyce, or you know, esoteric works, you know, that you have to really sit down and think
Any other
about,
modernist
analyze
novelist
them.
you could think of.
Any other.
Do you think does like different poets in different like form and different like verse, does it like affect? I mean, there's different ways in a poem can affect you, you know, like your body and your mind. Does it affect? Do you have a sense like a poem from Saul Williams affects your mind differently than the way an Edgar Allan Poe poem would, or even your body?
Well, I think it does. I mean, profoundly, because I think he's, you know, he has all these references to forms of mysticism. So especially Buddhist and Hindu practices. So that has its own kind of, you know, the mind state affects the body affects the mind, so that kind of thing. And then there's also, with the influence of hip hop, there's references to breakdancing. So he would have a poem where he's going from chanting Om to beatboxing to then dancing as he's performing. So it kind of, as you hear that, and or even attempt to recite it along with him, it is transformative. It's kind of, because Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven, is its own.
Well, it's almost like, and it's interesting because you studied cinema at USC, but it's like almost like there's you call it formal or informal, or formal and casual, but it's almost like, it becomes a mixed media type of film.
Right.
I always go back to the Emily Dickinson quote of, if I feel that the top of my head were physically taken off, I know that that's poetry. So Emily for the
Emily,
win.
it's amazing.
She gets it.
Amazing.
Well, I wanted to ask, I know your family, like you come from a family of artists, and how did that impact your poetry, and how does that impact your going into this?
Yeah, so I can happily say that I'm a failed artist, because that was my first ambition, of course. So my uncle is a famed Chicano muralist. He was part of Los Four Art Collective. They had a groundbreaking show. They were the first group of Chicano artists to get into LACMA, to put on a number of shows in New York that were absolutely groundbreaking at a time when there were not a lot of Chicanos, especially not ones from Los Angeles, putting on shows in fine art galleries in New York, and then to have their works placed in the Smithsonian, to have documentaries about them, and now his work is on permanent display at the Cheech. I
was going to say, I think about the Cheech. Yeah, he's terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, so being raised in that and going to art galleries at a young age, and meeting so many other artists, a lot of them, unfortunately, I never really got a chance to know Carlos Almaraz, who was one of his contemporaries, very well, but he, would very often be at these showings, and Mr. De La Roca, Zach De La Roca's, father, who was part of that group as well, and Magoo, is also in those circles. Meeting so many artists and people connected, so many patrons as well. It was just such a different flavor from what I grew up with in Diamond Bar. And you learn a lot about art, about color, about, and it really motivated me to actually, that's one of my passions. I never pursued it, but is art history, is analyzing. I mean, silently here, to spoil it, for the listeners out there, is Matt Sedillo.
Thanks for being a good host.
But he'll often make fun of me for, and I've actually had an ex who was the same. They'll say, you feel so free to criticize everything you see.
It's the curse of any artist, or I don't know, maybe I'm just rationalizing because I have a tendency to do that too.
Well, and maybe it's not always critique, it can just be analysis.
Wait, can you tell us more about Diamond Bar though? Your
Sure.
family is this famed Chicano artist family, like Los Four, but you grew up in Diamond Bar, and I mean, I'll just be transparent. I think the listeners know I'm not originally from California.
Yeah.
I came here by way of New Orleans, so tell me, how far is Diamond Bar from
That's a poem right there.
Yeah. So Diamond Bar,
Yeah.
for the listeners out there, for the uninformed, is it's close to the cities of Pomona, Anaheim,
Right.
Walnut, and if none of that makes any, and why would it? It's closer to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Much closer to Disneyland than it is to Los Angeles.
Okay.
So that's basically for anyone out. They say, "Where's that?" I say, "It's by Disneyland."
Yeah.
They
What
say,
does it mean to
okay.
be like writing a love letter to your town?
Really as an adult writer, what stimulated my interest in writing and in poetry was hip hop. And in hip hop, there is a great tradition of writing anthems to one's
That's true.
hometown,
Yeah.
one's city, much like in country music.
Yeah.
There's a lot of love for one's community and giving details about what the architecture of the places is like, what living there in the day-to-day descriptions of what it's like, and all of the quote colloquial names for the different streets, the different neighborhoods, all of that. There's a real journalistic, on the ground kind of journalistic character to it. One thing when I started writing poetry is that I felt that same kind of urge to, well, let me write about this place. And also what I thought was funny was that, no one would want to write about this place because it's boring. It's not cool. It doesn't give you any street cred,
Yeah.
but then finding things like ridiculous things to keep repeating. Well, Snoop Dogg lives here.
Right.
you know.
Right.
Well, but it's also, as a writer, as a poet, you can look at any landscape and find, something. And Joyce didn't write it on Dublin until he left.
Right.
And he had it all in his head. You go, oh yeah, this is the corner where that bar is, and then you walk over here and the street grade is broken, and stuff like that. But
Right.
Did you grow up bilingual or English only, or what was your family like with language growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up English only. My father, my great grandfather was half white, half Mexican. He was the bastard son of this gentleman who was Hun. Because of he was trying to privatize some community-owned land in Texas. There was a dispute with business partners. People turned against him or with him. then back
Frontier
against him.
justice there, yeah.
Yeah. But
Some California roots there.
so the fascinating thing to come out of all of that, though, was that for some reason, my great grandfather, his last name was Jurado. They adopted the anglicized version of the name. He just, for whatever reason, grew up with a very firm idea in his mind that he was, American, and he was going to assimilate as much as possible, and that he was only going to speak English for the rest of his life.
Absolutely.
By all accounts, he, was a great, hardworking man, really loved his family. But I'm fortunate that I can live in a time and in a situation where I can look back and see, look at that as being a mistake, that was passed on, that ethos.
Well, and that, we're in a moment where, it's absolutely more important that your children have more than one language. Your family keeps the heritage. You don't divorce yourself. But of course, in those days, it was a very different point of view. We are only Americans. We are only speaking English. And then you kind of, the rest of that sits in the background. But it doesn't stay quiet. It's still there.
That was around the same time that Mexican Americans were getting lynched at a historic rate per population. That's actually the greatest in a 20-year period in American history. Within that short window. So so definitely a time, assimilate or die.
I was gonna say it's a survival. It's not a mistake. It's a means of survival.
Very persuasive. Yes. Yeah.
So do you live in LA now? Are you?
Actually, I live in Diamond Bar. I'm holding it down.
Holy, for real. I was thinking about I want to go back to I just want to make a point about Afro Man and the fact that I went out to Palmdale to go see the Poppies last year, and I was like, this is Palmdale. It is a boring ass town, and we are it's because that song is an anthem. So I think Diamond Bars is related to Afro Man in that way. No, that's really interesting. We're making a thread we're from Joyce to Afro Man to David A. Romero.
Hell yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
I'm really
loving it.
because I know that.
Yeah. And people get all sorts of weird misconceptions, so let me clear this up. So Diamond Bar is actually a city that's primarily Asian. So it started off, but its history actually traces back to the indigenous people, the Tonva, who lived here. And then this Spanish ranching system.
Right.
And then for a time it was Mexican, and then bought out by mostly Anglos, and then mostly Caucasian, and then now Asian.
So it's called Diamond Bar because that was a ranching brand.
Yes,
That was a
yes.
cattle brand. Now it
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
So my question, identifying, I think maybe everybody in the room could identify as a struggling, not a struggling artist, I don't want to say that, but an artist trying to live. An artist trying to live in the state of California. The question is like, how do you pay your rent as an art or as a poet?
So how do I pay my rent as a poet? Let's see here. I work for UPS. I just threw out my back. That was fun. Yay,
There's the
workers'
day
comp.
gig. You got to do
Yeah,
it.
we're at a
Absolutely.
Yeah, and thank goodness for benefits. You know, it's the only part-time job in the country just about that's left because of the Teamsters. So
True.
So thank goodness for that. And
I know I've been looking for a UPS driving husband. Yeah, I mean their benefits are good, man.
they're
But
solid.
we have this cozy bookstore.
Yeah, no, you can throw on your back.
Yeah.
When I'm working at this bookstore. I tell you what. I tell you what.
Books are like bricks.
Moving
boxes of
those
bricks.
boxes around.
Moving those boxes, yeah. And aside from that, Matt Sedillo and I run El Martillo Press. We also are. I'm also a spoken word artist. He is as well. So we do professional gigs. We get booked at colleges and universities, at community centers. He has a job at a prison or at multiple prisons.
Should we?
Oh, wow.
Let's introduce Matt.
We
Let's
have
get
a
into it.
special guest, everybody. This is our first time to have a dual guest podcast, I think.
Wow, thank you for having me.
So tell us about how you all started El Martillo Press.
Or first introduce, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
First introduce yourself.
I'm Matt Sedillo. I'm the literary director of the Mexican Cultural Institute of Los Angeles, the national coordinator for the World Poetry Movement in the U.S., as well as the co-founder of El Martillo Press.
Excellent. So tell us about how you started Press. Now, I'm assuming that this is where David Romero gets published, but you do have other poets or other authors?
David translated. We have a translated version of Yo Soy Romero, which is my name's Romero originally. Published by Flower Song Press. David's Diamond Bars 2 is actually on Moontide Press. In addition to the translated version of I'm Romero, my name is Romero, Yo Soy Romero, we've also published Paper Birds by Sonia Gutierrez, as well as Detoxification of the Body by Gabor Gucic from Hungary, as well as Crown of Flames by Flaminia Cruciani, Touch of Sky by Donana Martinez, The God of the Air Hose by Cesar K. Avalar, the poet laureate of Pomona, The Daughterland by Margaret Elisa Garcia, and We Still Be, which actually just won the American Book Award.
Very nice. Applause for Book Award.
Yeah.
Well,
That feels pretty good for El Sedillo Press. Yeah.
So how did you wait? So tell us a little origin story of El Martillo Press.
Well, El Martillo Press, you can't really tell a story of El Martillo Press without telling the story of Flower Song, and specifically the California faction we called Flower Strong. So I originally got published with Flower Song a while back when I published a book called Mowing Leaves of Grass with them. And I think it was like the third or fourth book that Edward Vidyare had published with Flower Song, because he had taken it over from David Bowles. And so it was pretty early on. And I remember Edward, we were doing a show at UCLA, and he ambitiously said, I want to be the Latino for Ligeti. And most people be like, "Oh my God!"
That's
right?
lovely.
I looked at him with a crazed look in my eyes, and like, I will be your Ginsberg, right? And so
there you go.
You're gonna say Hell was the poem that unlocked it for me.
Yeah, so I don't really, I didn't flinch at that.
Now the beard is perfect.
And so the book Mowing Leaves of Grass ended up selling like something like 10,000 copies, somewhere around there. And so it's taught in ethnic studies courses all across the country. Actually, Cal State Northridge, if you want to get a credential to be a ethnic studies teacher, you have to read Mowing Leaves of Grass. So more part of the required, whatever. So with the success of that book, I told Edward, I can help you build up the West Coast branch of Flower Song. And there was other people he wanted to publish, including Louis Resto, as well as Sonia Gutierrez, and a few other people that he really, really wanted to publish, as well as David. And so I'm like, well, I can get you all these people, because he'd been trying for a minute, but I had long histories with everybody. I've been working with him for a decade.
Sure, it helps.
And so I was able to bring all these people to Flower Song. And then me and David together built kind of a touring wing of Flower Song Press here in California. And so we set up all these group readings, especially here at the Village Well. We did a couple here, as well as the first Culver City Book Fair. And so that was kind of whatever. But, and with that, with getting him what he wanted, he would also allow us to make suggestions for people to publish. And so, we kind of had this vision of how to build California. But he had his own vision of what he wanted to do with his press. And of course, at the end of the day, it's his press. So that's, we made all these promises we had to keep. And so we made a press. That's basically the story about Martillo.
And can you just give an example of like, this was in one direction that they were trying, trying to go in?
We wanted to
and
publish
realized...
Caesar K. Avalar, and he wasn't. He was just backed up because he had so many people he's publishing all across the country.
Yeah.
Who was who became poet laureate Pomona. And Paul Flores was another one. He's won the American Book Award. And he wanted to publish other people. And so we thought that was really kind of a priority to publish people that we kind of made promises to. And so originally we wanted to kind of do an imprint, but then it was like, it didn't make any sense. It's already an independent press to have an imprint within an independent press. It doesn't really make sense. But I was really trying. I mean, it was really me. I was the one trying to make an imprint because the reality was we'd worked so hard to help build up Flower Song on the West Coast.
Sure.
That, I didn't want to feel like, I worked all that hard and everything's going to start begin all over again.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do that, and I wanted to have an imprint called Flower Strong. And basically, he was like, well, if I do that, it's going to blur the line between Flower Song and Flower Song, what you guys are doing.
Getting close there, yeah.
And I'm like, well, yes, I want to blur the line. You owe it to me to blur the line. I don't know who the hell you think you are. And anyways. But that's just my megalomania.
It's really funny.
Well, it's also kind of a poetic way to, move a little poetry around. So
Yeah.
So as a publisher, how do poets call to you? How do you decide whose work really connects with how you want to present?
Well, I mean, like, it's between me and David. So I mean, neither one of us makes the final decision without consulting each other. So we run the press together. But
Partners are important.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But basically, I mean, the kind of criteria we're often looking for is basically if someone has a following already, because otherwise, you're spending money. If we think the work's really good, as another consideration, and also how does it fit into the whole scheme of what we're doing?
Sure.
And also somebody's easy to get along with. I mean, if you're a difficult person,
Artists are never
well, I mean, it's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Yeah, but like if you're like, you could be this difficult if you have this much of following. But if you have this much of following, I guess we're on radio, but my hands are going up and down. You can imagine. Yeah. If you have this much of following and you're this difficult, the answer is no. I mean, like,
got it.
I have to have a reason why I'm putting up with this.
That's you answered the question.
That's
how do you? That's almost like an objective. Like, okay, if they're 80% this and 20% that, then yes. But if they're 20% there and there, then no.
No.
Is there a poet in your catalog that's just absolutely surprised you with how they connected, or how well they did, or how well they didn't do?
I'll let Dave answer this because I don't want to.
All right. Maybe the answer is no.
Okay.
Maybe they were no. All of our poets performed exactly as we kind of thought they would.
So yes, one of our top performers, one of our shining lights is, Matt, of course, did rightly call attention to Paulus Flores winning the American Book Award.
Absolutely.
But we knew Paul's very famous. He's recognized all over the country, and that's not just in his bio. It's literally true. He knows a lot of the national coordinators to a lot of the big Latino advocacy groups, media groups, literacy groups. So that's to be expected. But someone who has been performing poetry for decades and has also been putting a lot of work, but has been more of a local figure is Professor Donato Martinez, who is one of our bestsellers. So yeah, that's really beautiful to see. And we knew by bringing Sonia Gutierrez in that she would continue. Yeah. She has won the Tomas Rivera Award. She's won awards within the International Latino Book Awards. So we know she has a strong following. But yeah, to answer this question, I would say it's definitely Donato Martinez who's really surprising us, and also someone that we knew that we were actually pushing hard to publish, and we were really happy that we got was Matt's friend and contact, Matthew Cuban Hernandez, who's a slam legend and who's performed in Abu Dhabi.
No, my question is what does it mean, like when you think about a following? Is it in the following in the literary world, or in like the for publisher, independent publisher? What does a following mean for y'all?
Yeah, so I think any metrics are valid to look at. If we can find any metrics, they might be like, number of shows that they've put on, number of people who looked like they might have been at those shows, Instagram followers, social media followers. Let's see here. What other metrics? Any sales evidence, any evidence of distribution, because that really shows you too, whether or not someone has secured a deal, is something, but also there are times where people do secure a wide distribution through an agent or a company, but then when they get dropped, when their book underperforms and they get dropped, then they're lost because they never learned how to do it from the ground up.
Sure.
Yeah, that's
So we look at all evidence of building, followings, a history of work, a history of investment.
Yeah, right on.
Would you say anything else?
Yeah, no, that's basically it. I mean, I think that David, that was a really that was a great answer. I mean, he's very diplomatic right now. I mean, normally he's like he's got the attitude of like it'd be like McDonald's, 1 billion sold, 85 billion served, a sale's a sale.
We can be candid. Yeah. We could.
No, I
we
like
can be
that. I
blunt.
like this idea though, especially because I mean your emblem is a hammer with the flowers around it, which feels like grassroots organizing, and this idea of somebody is only is going to only work at our press or any press is insofar as they understand how to build a following or build a movement for themselves and create a history from the ground
I
up.
wanted to shine a light on your scholarship opportunity that David Romero has a
David
device.
A. Romero.
David A. Romero
I go by my
has a
full
device
name.
by which to cultivate students in this direction. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Oh, thank you so much, Judith. Some years ago, I was inspired by a stand-up comedian, Ernie Gruitsky, to create the Romero Scholarship for Spoken Word, because he was really one of the only traveling touring artists that I had ever seen who had, would take some of the money that he was earning from doing his college shows and his other various gigs towards a scholarship. So, and I had donated, I had been asked to donate this Hispanic Alumni Council at the University of Memphis to do that. And I was sent the pictures. They made one of those big checks. And they said, made possible by David A. Romero. I'm like, wow, this is what a great feeling to be a benefactor, and to help people out. So I created my own scholarship from the ground up. It's my own money that I donate. And I actually relapsed last year, unfortunately, but before that, 5 years ongoing. So the first few years were 500, then I escalated it to 1,000, because I really felt like in order to make any kind of impact, cost of living, the cost of education, books, alone.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So that could definitely be a make or break issue for a lot of people, especially wanting to pursue creative endeavors.
Yeah.
English majors, creative writing, art, architecture, whatever it might be.
So let's say a
yeah.
student wanted to take advantage of that opportunity. How would they get in touch with your scholarship fund?
Yeah, so you can find it at davidaromero.com/scholarship. It's also on the headline if you visit davidaromero.com, and it's free application. And
that helps a lot.
Yeah, it's called the Romero Scholarship for Spoken Word, but there's actually no audio component to it. It's a page submission.
Okay.
So it's a blind viewing by the judge's determination, and it really focuses in on social justice and whatever that might be. If that's race and ethnicity, hunger and homelessness, poverty, LGBT plus issues, war, whatever it might be. However they frame social justice, any combination of any of those things, whatever it might be.
I wanted to give Matt a chance to give a little pitch about your book that's coming out from Martillo Press.
No, this is actually going to be Flower Song as well, because I'm actually going to try and make Edward go out there and try and get me some awards.
Awards are good.
So-
Awards are always good.
This is really cool though, like that y'all are truly like actually continuing to flower with Flower Song and your own
Yeah. Well, yeah.
press.
Well, the goal is this next book. I'm gonna try and get it. This is one I'm gonna do with El Martillo, with Flower Song. And after that, the next book after that, I'm gonna try and see if I can get City Lights.
So what's the book that's coming out?
The one that's coming though is called Mexican Style.
Do you want to give a little shelf talker for Mexican
Shelf
style?
Talker. Okay, let's see. Two friends who bonded over a past they never knew seek out the grave of Maria Felix. A young man chooses between his incarcerated uncle and his dead father to pattern his life. Another digs into the soil in search of the sins of his father. Prison guards every night bury the memory of what once was in the light of the prison yard. All this and more can be found in Mexican Style.
Now that's a shelf talker. We can stand there. Yeah.
The latest, most innovative poetry collection from Matt Sedillo, winner of the Dante's Laurel in 2022, the Joe Hill Labor Poetry Award in 2017.
A shelf talker for
Author
sure.
of Mowing Leaves the Grass, been translated in Hungarian, Spanish, Italian, Chinese.
Now you're on the back of the book.
Yeah.
Now you're under the author picture.
Yeah, now I'm actually just talking to your listeners, you know.
So our final question in shelf talkers, like we are bookend, would be for David. Please recommend 3 books and like do a little shelf talker for 3 different books that you could find at the Village Well Books and Coffee that you would want folks that are listening to read.
Or maybe that we should have on the shelf at Village Well Books and Coffee.
Okay, let's see here. So I'm going to start off with a roundabout plug, which is Real Americans by Rachel Kahn, who I went to school with in Diamond Bar, wrote a blurb for my book. But that is a brilliant, subtle science fiction story that plays out in a slow burn, starts as a romance story, and it's focused on issues of cultural identity, particularly Chinese American via way of immigrant identity. So yes, powerful.
We do have that
beautiful.
one on the shelf.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So that's number 1. Number 2. I have no idea whether or not it's out on the shelf particularly, but I would recommend Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut because it's my favorite book ever. Like many Vonnegut books, it contains problematic material. Here's definitely a product of his times, and I think this is one of the most beautifully books ever written. It's a science fiction book that's written with the wit of Oscar Wilde, the eloquence. Each line, each paragraph is exquisite. It tells the plot from the very beginning of the entire book, and yet at every turn you're still surprised. And it's the only book that I know of that can really do that. It's about predestination, and yet it's surprising. So really the groundwork, the forebear for Slaughterhouse-Five, the much more famed work by him. And then third would be another masterpiece, City on the Second Floor by Mr. Matt Sedillo, can be found in the poetry section. Brilliant. It's The Twilight Zone meets The Wire. Two things.
That's a shelf talker right there.
All of these
That
are
is a
great.
shelf talker for the win.
I think it's time to wrap up, but we really appreciate both of y'all for coming in. This has been so fun.
Yeah, it was great. Fantastic, wonderful answers, and good luck on all of your books, the ones you write and the ones you publish, and happy trails. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
If you'd like more information from us, check out the show notes or send us an email at podcast@villagewell.com. You can always order the books mentioned in each episode through villagewell.com. This episode of Shelf Talkers is brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee. It was produced and edited by Josh Stretton Carlson, and our theme music is from Noah Vickland. See you in 2 weeks, and keep reading.